Hello, everyone, and welcome to our workshop. I'm just waiting for folks who are planning to join. I should open. Anyways, my name is Jael Richardson, and I am presenting this workshop on designing virtual author presentations for schools. This is a workshop I wanted to do. You might be watching this live, or you might be watching it on demand, to help authors who are looking to do presentations in schools based on my experience as an author and also my experiencing in running the fold, which I'll talk about in a bit. Before I get into too many details, I want to share a little bit about Pitch Perfect. Pitch Perfect is our annual opportunity for children's authors, aspiring children's authors, to have an opportunity to meet with publishers and industry professionals. And so it's your opportunity to connect with an agent or editor, to bring your manuscript to them and to have them see it and review it. So our the application is now open. You can go to fullcanada.org/pitch perfect kids. You can see the link in the bottom right corner. And the deadline is August 31st, 2026. So that's coming up soon. Um, I'm just going to start by actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and do a little demo. So one of the things that we'll talk about as we go through this presentation is how to present well in a virtual environment. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that works and what works best. But one of the things I want to do is just demonstrate how I always start my presentations, which is to actually pull the PowerPoint away. And I recommend you do that various points throughout your presentation if you do have a PowerPoint, to also pull it down and give full access to folks. And I'll often just showcase some of the books that I've published and talk through those. So one of the things that I've done in my writing career is publish different books for different age categories and audiences. So this is Today I Am. It's an anthology of children's writers. And there are 10 different stories in here. One of them I wrote, and I also edited this collection. The Stone Thrower was my very first book as a memoir, and I turned that into a children's book as well, which eventually led me to publish two other children's books, which I'll talk about both of these a little bit in the presentation, Because You Are and The Hockey Jersey. So as we go through the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about how best to connect with audiences virtually, some of the tips and tools and things you can do to build a connection. But one of the things I love to do off the top is just do a little bit of that get to know me. I'll go back to the presentation that I've built, and you'll see some of the other books that I actually don't have with me, which is embarrassing. Today, I don't have a copy of Gutter Child, or I didn't show the Stone Thrower, but this is the full collection of the books I've written. Stone Thrower and Gutter Child are more young adult to adult audiences. As I mentioned, Today I Am is middle grade. And then the three children's books across the bottom are for audiences ages 4 to 8. So I'm going to be talking a lot about how to adapt your presentation and deliver a presentation for different audiences and age groups and how to keep that in mind. But I want to start by talking about why virtual events are important. Obviously, in 2020, everybody started doing virtual events at that time during the pandemic. There was a need to continue to earn an income, visit schools, and we weren't physically able to. And so a lot of us adapted and did virtual presentations and virtual events and virtual panels. And as we've gotten further and further away from the pandemic, I think that there has been a question about how whether these are still necessary. I've heard authors adamantly say, I don't do virtual presentations anymore. And I think that's a real shame. I think virtual events are essential for kid-lit authors, especially in Canada. I think it gives you an opportunity to visit places outside of your geographic reach. And I think one of the goals for most authors is to have as many readers as possible know about your work and follow you. And so I think it's really important to make it a priority. I have said to publishers for years, I think that when you submit a book for publication, a short story, a middle grade, a young adult title, that you should also be thinking about how you would present it in person in a classroom and how you would present it virtually in a classroom. And so I really encourage you to think about that as you're creating a book. What are some of the themes? What are some of the curriculums? What are some of the topics that are going to be interesting to a classroom? And potentially even put that on your website as something teachers can see as soon as they find you and your work. Virtual events expand, as I mentioned, your access, your ability to reach across the country. No matter where you are, you can get into remote classrooms that have internet access. And so it's a really important way in terms of access to not only think about your ability to access them, but to think about their ability to access a diverse range of authors. It's so important to me that a wide range of teachers can see a wide range of authors, and a wide range of students can see a wide range of authors. And so making yourself available to visit communities that where people look like you or don't look like you are both really important to the Canadian literary ecology. And not to mention that it just increases the audience, the number of people who know about your books, which increases every time you publish a book. Those people who followed you the first time are likely following you and will support you the next time. So, all this to say is that I think virtual events are essential. I think that when done well, they actually offer unique opportunities to do things differently than you would do in person. They don't become something that's a lesser than version of an in-person event. They become a different experience for your audience to the point that you could go in person and go virtually and do two very different things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that over the course of the presentation. One of the things I'll say here before we move on is that virtual events require thoughtful planning. And that's a lot about what I'm going to talk about today, is the planning that goes into it and the sort of places to start. So one of the key elements to a virtual event, a virtual presentation in a classroom, is to identify a lesson, goal, or aim. Know exactly what you want to accomplish by the end of the workshop. And I find this isn't something that all authors do. I think that we're all very clear about the goal or aim of a particular book. But when we think about going into a classroom, we think those two things are the same, and they're not always the same. For example, I've written picture books in which there is a particular goal or a particular aim. In Because You Are. I wanted kids to learn that beauty isn't something you see from the outside, it's something that comes from the inside. And that was a very clear aim. It's a very clear message in the story. But if I go into a high school classroom where they're learning to write children's books, that's not going to be the aim of the workshop. The workshop is going to be about teaching young people how to create a clear story. I may even go to a middle grade group and have a slightly different aim than I might have for a younger group where I'll want to simplify the aim a little bit. Generally speaking, though, my lessons and aims transcend age category. That's not where the differences come. The differences come in my plan. But you really want to think about not just what your book is about, but what your actual aim of the workshop is. I'm going to show you a few examples. And what I find from my examples is my examples help me create my titles and my descriptions as well. So you want to really think, what do I want to accomplish? And I'll warn you, most authors want to accomplish too much in one workshop than can actually be achieved. And so it's also about really simplifying it. What can I reasonably teach and transmit in a 30 to 45-minute presentation? Lesson plan. Once you have your goal or aim, you're going to develop your lesson plan. And for me, they kind of work in together. If you've ever written, and we all did at one point, essays where you made your thesis and you make your arguments, it's kind of the same thing. You're going to make your aim, you're going to start to build your plan and your project, and you may come back and actually refine or fine tune your aim at that point. But your lesson plan is where you're going to make clear definitions in terms of time. How much time am I going to spend on the opening? How much time does it take me to read a story? How much time will it take me to teach this particular component of the workshop? And how much time do they need to execute it? So all of those are really, really important to fine tune because in your lesson plan, you're also going to identify what supplies you need, what resources are going to be necessary, and other things that might be helpful to you in presenting your workshop. The last thing is perhaps the most important. When you're developing your lesson plan, it is critical that you understand the age that you're presenting to. I am also highly surprised at how many authors write books for a particular age group, but don't often know a lot about how that age group reacts or responds, particularly in a classroom. So if you are writing for 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds or 6 or 7-year-olds or middle grade, 10 to 12-year-olds, it's really important that you understand not only what they like, but how they operate, what they can generally do, what kids who are at a high level can do versus kids who are at a lower level of that age group can do, so that you can build a plan that effectively serves the whole classroom and doesn't, and this is key, overwhelm the teacher. If you don't have a child this age, and even if you do, I recommend talking to a teacher or finding yourself amongst a group of children that age and studying the group. Because oftentimes we'll base it on our kid or a kid we know well that may not reflect the whole spectrum. And so the more you know about your age group, what they can do, how they function in a classroom, the better your presentation is going to be, and especially your execution. Okay, so these are some sample lesson aims for the three books you'll see on the right-hand side. So Because You Are is my youngest age category. And so for my aim, I said through a reading of Because You Are and the activity that follows, children will explore characteristics that make them beautiful. And so I highlighted explore characteristics because that's going to be a key word that I may want to reinforce and teach and emphasize over the course of the presentation. I was weighing between character and characteristics. It also may be a fun thing to explore those two words together. What's the difference between character and characteristics, right? Characteristics are like good, happy, qualities that you have, and character is how you live them out. And so these are things that I want to talk about with this age group, and I'm going to do activities. The book itself talks about these things, but I'm going to try and from my intro to the very end of my presentation, be thinking about character and characteristics. I'm going to be bringing up that word maybe off the top. I'm going to be repeating it later because it's my lesson aim and it helps keep me focused all the way through. The second one is The Stone Thrower is a bit longer. It's a historical story about my father, Chuck Ealey, who was a professional football player. And so this one is true story. And so for the aim, I said students will cultivate empathy by exploring themes of racism, resilience, and belonging, and by identifying practical ways they can demonstrate courage by standing up for what is right. So there's a lot here. It's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit juicier. I may even want to pare this down a little bit more. I was playing around with it. But the key factor for me is cultivating empathy and practical. These are things I want to teach something that you can't quite touch. I'm going to cultivate empathy. I'm going to teach them to care about a story that's true and a person who exists. And then I'm going to try and transmit practical ways that they can demonstrate courage. I'm going to clearly ask questions about things they could do. I'm going to help connect not only what my dad did in his community, but what they can do in their own community. And so that's going to guide everything from the beginning of the presentation to the end of the presentation in terms of what I do. The last one is a craft-based workshop. So the other two are more are thematic. They're based on a theme or a topic or subject. And the last one is craft. I'm going to teach kids to write. We're going to do some practical writing if we do this particular workshop. And so in this one, students will discover that there are multiple ways to write and start a story by analyzing openings from Today I Am and by beginning their own short story through a series of writing prompts. So in this one, and I often end up doing this, I put a little bit of my plan into the aim as well so that it guides. I know that I want them to learn something. I want them to discover that there's multiple ways to tell a story. That's probably like my key aim. And I'm going to do that by analyzing openings and by working on their own short story. So I sometimes will mix what I'm going to do into my aim because I find it also helps teachers prepare a little bit. And when I put that description on my website, they're like, oh, okay, I know this one. This is one we're going to do, and they're going to need their pens, they're going to need paper, they're going to need things like that. So the lesson aims can be like the first one, very simple, very straightforward, or they can help you frame out the entire presentation by having a little bit of the plan incorporated. I'm going to do a story time reading to teach them this with an activity that follows. And so that's generally how you want to think about aims as well. I want to teach them this through this, so they learn this. It's another way to think about doing your lesson aims. So these are sample activities, and oh gosh, I'm super passionate about this. A lot of people, as I mentioned at the beginning, think that when you do virtual, there are fewer options or it's not as rich or meaningful. And I find that so strange because I think there are a lot of ways you can actually do more virtually because you're in your home and you have access to so many things that really fascinate kids, right? I used to, in the day, like drag a case around to go do in-person presentations, and I'd have, you know, my dad's football card and all these sample things that I would want to show kids. And it was like, oh my gosh. But when you do it virtually, you can have all those things. I have a pile of things right next to me that I can just grab and show. So I want to talk through a couple of sample activities, things that you can put into a plan before I show you an actual lesson plan. So one of the things that you can do is some sort of story time or reading. I'm going to show you how to make a story time or reading a little bit more interesting in a virtual context. I don't recommend for a picture book that you go on screen and you open up your book and you read it this way. It's very difficult for kids to read the book. It's very difficult for them to see the illustration. And the whole benefit of a picture book is being able to see those pictures up close. So I'm going to show you an example of what I do and how I set up my picture books. You can do a reading. I do recommend if you plan to read a section from your book and it's a chapter book, I do recommend putting the text on the screen as well, or having a copy of the cover of your book with some of the text from the screen. It's just really helpful to be able to allow kids to follow along. Readings aren't for everybody. I also highly recommend you keep them super short, paragraph, two, no more than a page. And that's a way to keep folks connected. But think about how can I do something in this virtual space that I can't do in an in-person space when it comes to reading? What can I show them that I couldn't show them if I was just, reading with my book, yeah, in person potentially? The other thing I love is show and tell. So I did a bit of show and tell at the beginning, and I showed you my books. I'm going to do a fun show and tell. I don't have a pet, but I have this. This is Ellie. He is a weighted elephant. And I know watching this, you're very excited seeing her. There's something that happens when you see someone's ridiculous things, whether that's their like furry cat or their ridiculously adorable licking dog. This is my pet. This is Ellie the elephant. She I got my sister a weighted panda, and I was so jealous at how much I wanted to hold the panda that I got myself my own weighted elephant. And it's like my comfort pillow friend, you know, Ellie. She's big. She's heavy. She's like 5 pounds. Okay, so you can show objects like that. You can show objects that you use for writing if you're an illustrator. You can do all kinds of things that you show on the screen that you can't, that are just super fun, and you can change it up. I tell you, when you show somebody a pet, they're going to ask you, what's their name? How long have you had her? How old? What kind? It generates so much interest. And so you can use show and tell really well, especially if you keep your theme in mind. What, based on the aim of my presentation, might connect them? Characteristics wise, what might connect them if I was focusing on characteristics? If I'm focusing on history, on my dad's football career, what object could I bring to show that's going to get them a little bit more connected to the subject and the material? You can also do video and image-based sharing. I'll show you some examples of that. I used to show clips from the Stone Thrower documentary in the older audiences when I did that. I'm also going to try and demonstrate an in-person in presentation activity or demonstration. This is especially helpful if you are an illustrator, because it's such a great way to show people what you actually do with your illustrations. So I'll try that in a second too. Writing prompts, obviously, but very important that you follow some key best practices, I think, for writing prompts. So I'm going to show you how to do that too, and then question and answer. So let's show some examples. So these are some examples I'm going to show you on the screen. The top is storytime reading. So Dinesh we set up our presentations, our story times for Fold, the same way I do as an author. And so we actually make a PowerPoint presentation of the book in which the pages actually fold. So you're actually turning the page and not just clicking through a PowerPoint. And it creates, I think, a different dynamic in the experience of reading through a story. So I'll show you how I do that. Show and tell. I've done a show and tell, and there's an example of one of our authors at Fold doing a show and tell. Writing prompts, you'll see one at the top corner. Very, very important if you're doing a writing prompt to put the writing prompt on the screen. I can't tell you how overwhelming it is as an adult and especially as a child if you say a writing prompt and then ask them to do it and there's nothing to see on the screen. There's no like, what did you actually ask me to do? What's the actual task? Worst feeling ever in terms of a writing workshop. So make sure you have your writing prompts on the screen. I recommend shorter writing prompts, 2 to 3 minutes of giving people to write and no more than 2 to 3 prompts. And this is because I think there are people in the classroom who will love to write, and there's people in the class for whom it will be torture. And you want to keep people, you don't want them to get to the point that they're like, and then having to do that. I'm going to do one more writing prompt. And every time you say writing prompt, people are like, oh my gosh, they take so long. So I recommend keeping them a little bit shorter than 5 minutes. If you're only doing one and you have an older audience, that may be a reason why you would go a little bit longer. And then the bottom right corner is an example of in-presentation activity or demonstration. Like I said, I'm going to try to do mine in a second. And it's where you actually set up, I'm using my phone. You have it in an overtop view or a bird's eye view, and you can actually do the activity alongside the students. This is a really important strategy for keeping folks' attention and for even, let's say the kids don't have all the activity pieces in front of them. The teacher has to go get something. The students aren't going to have it at all. It allows them to watch something and view something even if they can't do it themselves. And if they can do it themselves, it gives them a live demonstration of how they're doing. It also is very helpful to you as an author because it tells you how long it might be taking them and it gives you some focus. Again, I'll talk about that in a moment. That skipped ahead pretty far. All right, so this is an example of a video or image-based sharing, which I talked about. When you're doing, depending on your book, depending on the themes, depending on what you've done with the book, you may have really great pictures of experiences that you've had that relate to the book. That would be a really great, it's kind of like another version of show and tell, right? But instead of showing them an actual object, you're showing them the experiences. And this is great for them understanding the life of an author. Sometimes it's glamorous, sometimes it's not. This is an example of a far more glamorous experience than I've ever had. So when I launched the hockey jersey, in January, we did an outdoor book launch in Toronto. It was very cold. I'm in my warmest jacket and I was still freezing. But this on the bottom left, you can see a picture of myself with the illustrator, Chelsea. She looks a lot cuter. She was a lot colder. And they gave us jerseys. And so we did this really fabulous book launch there. They also set us up at a hockey jersey clinic for girls and particularly girls of color. And I was able to read the story to those girls in the arena where the Toronto Maple Leafs play. And so this is a great way to kind of show images that students will launch a lot of questions. It can often be a great way something great to show right before you go into the question and answer period because it keeps their mind really perked for things they want to know more about. And so that's just an example of that video or image-based sharing. This is a sample plan. So you'll see on the right my plan for how I do Because You Are in a classroom. And so my aim, as I showed in the earlier slides on a lesson aim, was through a reading of Because You Are, children will explore characteristics that make them beautiful. And I'm going to do a welcome and show and tell. I'm going to do 5 minutes. You'll see I've indicated on the side there for you in particular where I'm going to show the PowerPoint and where I'm not going to show the PowerPoint. It's a helpful reminder for me because sometimes, you'll have a slide screen up at the beginning and you have to remember to take it down. I've done most of this presentation with my PowerPoint up, but when I do it for kids, I make sure that that's pulled away for long periods of time so they can see me and they can get to know me. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to show the book. I'm going to show a few items from my writing life. I'm going to show maybe a stuffy, my favorite t-shirt, something I made. And the reason in that framework, I'm going to use the idea of like what makes me happy, what makes me feel good about myself, what am I really proud that I've accomplished. So my books are one thing, but I may also want to show them, I work for an organization. I designed this t-shirt. This is something I get to do as part of my job too. I'm really proud of that. And so I'm going to start with that kind of show and tell, and then I'm going to read the story as part of the second section of the conversation. In the third section, it's going to be a brainstorm and activity. So I'm going to define the word character and characteristics. I'm going to make sure those are very clear. Sometimes, depending on the age category, I may mention them or define them up top, and then I'll reinforce it afterwards. And then I'm going to ask them to brainstorm examples of characteristics. Give me some examples of how you might describe someone. And keep in mind that sometimes you're going to do a virtual presentation where you can get automatic feedback and quick feedback. Especially if you're with one class, you can often get immediate results. If you're doing it at Fold or for a festival where there might be multiple classes tuning in, sometimes you won't have immediate feedback. So you'll need to either leave a little bit of time or just continue kind of talking through it, even as they're populating answers in. Oh, so I think about the word kind. I think about the word brave. And then, oh, yeah, I know Miss So-and-so's class, you just popped in the word helpful. That's such a great word. And so you're going to sort of talk through that. And eventually, you're going to want to show a pre-made list of characteristics. They may have put some on the board. That may be your instructions for them. But I'm always going to bring up a slide that has my pre-made list of characteristics. And then I'm going to walk them through the activity. This is where life gets interesting to see if I can actually handle this. Um, we'll see if I can do this. I'm going to try and demonstrate for you what I would do for them. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Can I stop share? We'll see if I know how to do this. Oh, I think I have to. Okay. Yes, you can see my watch. It's helping me keep time. Okay, so when I do, this is like a demonstration. When I do the demonstration for Because You Are, I am going to have shown them a screen potentially with the words on it. And so there's a couple different ways I can do that. But I may also want to, after showing the screen, or instead of showing the screen, I may want to do a bit of a drawing and draw a girl. Well, this pen doesn't work very well. You know when you like go to grab a pen and it's always the one that doesn't work? That is like my kryptonite. All right, pencil it is. So I'm going to draw a face. I'm going to draw curly hair, right? And I'm going to put just a heart on my face because I don't want to draw my own face. I'm just giving the hair the vibes. This is my hair. And then I'm going to pick characteristics of myself to write around the outside. This is what I want you guys to do. And I'm going to put happy. That's one of my favorite words. I like the way it sounds. I like the way it works. I think I'm pretty fun to be around. And so I'm going to do the actual activity while they're watching so that they can see what I'm doing and so that I am on task while they're working. And so that's just an example I wanted to show you of giving an in-class demonstration. If you are an illustrator in particular, you're going to find that to be a really useful tool because it helps kids love, and I mean love, to see you draw and create your art. And so that's going to be a way to keep you on task, to help the teacher like know what's going on and to help each of the students individually follow. And so I may do that. One of the things that's very important, I noted 4 to 6 at the top for the age category. It's really, really important to know, are they 4-year-olds? Are they 5-year-olds? Are they 6-year-olds? Are they 7-year-olds? Each age is slightly different in terms of what you can expect. So for example, at 4, most of those kids can't write at all. So you may be asking them to just draw a picture or an emoji that reflects like how they feel about themselves. And as you get older, you may say, pick one characteristic and put that word in big letters at the top of your page. So you're going to be really precise with your instructions based on the age category you're working with. But as I said, I try and make a plan that kind of can work for everyone. And then as I go down in age, I kind of adapt. I also use the math of five. Multiply their age by five. That's how long your presentation should be. It stops working around 16, 17. So you don't have to keep multiplying if they're 40. But when you're doing a kid's presentation, if you multiply their age by five, that's about how much attention or time you can really bank on having. And so that also helps me frame my plan. For the last section, I'm always going to do a question and answer. I'm always going to let them ask me some questions. And I'm also always going to close with a connection back to my lesson aim. So you'll see there at the bottom, I'm going to close by asking them to whisper or shout their favorite characteristic about themselves. And I'm going to base the whisper on the shout based on the teacher's preference. I'm like, teachers, you're going to instruct your students to either whisper, depending on where you are, or shout their favorite thing about themselves. Their favorite, what's that word? Characteristic, right? So we're going back to that lesson aim to keep it really rounded and really clear. I'll do one more sample lesson plan, and this is more for the craft-based workshop because I said I was going to talk about writing prompts, and I want to make sure I do. So for today, students will discover that there are multiple ways to write it and start a story by analyzing openings from Today I Am and by beginning their own short story through a series of writing prompts. So in the welcome, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Because You Are, but I'm going to tailor it towards this discussion, right? Where do I get my beginnings? Where do my ideas start? Sometimes I remember the idea for the fold came to me, the name for the fold came to me in the shower. I was in the shower and I was like, and I had to like come out all soaking wet and write it down on a piece of paper because I did not believe I worried I would forget it. But so you can show pictures, and don't show pictures of you in the shower, but you know what I mean? Show pictures of the places where you come up with ideas, the places that spark ideas for you. You can do your opening and tailor it towards the theme and aim you're going to have. But again, we're going to do that about 5 to 10 minutes. We're going to do it with no PowerPoints. So that's a really great place to show each of my books. You'll notice with the younger age category, I didn't say to show all my books because I think it's too much information. I'm going to keep them really solid on Because You Are. I'm going to keep it really clear that that's the book we're talking about. For the older age groups, I can do that off the top. I can show them I've written a middle grade book, I've written a picture book, I've written a novel because they may be interested in all of those things or any of those things. So you're going to tailor that opening. Exploring Today I Am. So I'm going to take a bit of learning. This is going to be PowerPoint. On PowerPoint, I'm going to explain what an anthology is, what an editor does, and I'm going to show them the opening pages, and I'm going to put it on the screen of 3 stories. One prose, one graphic story, and one story that's told in verse to show them how different stories are structurally done so that they have a sense that there's not just like, I write the whole story out sentence after sentence after sentence. And that's going to be sort of the learning piece, right? This is where they get that first part, discover that there's multiple ways. And then I'm going to do writing prompts. I'm going to help them start a story. And I'm going to do it in 3 prompts. Each prompt is going to be 2 to 3 minutes max. And that's 10 minutes total, right? You do 5 minutes max each, and it's 15 minutes in all your presentation. And so I'm going to give them in the first one, I'm going to give them the opening line, and they're going to continue the story. In the second one, I'm going to give them an opening word or a location, and they can write whatever they want, whatever comes to mind. And in the third one, I'm going to give them nothing. And they can write whatever they want, or they can continue a story that they've already started. The other thing that they're going to do, or that I'm going to instruct them to do, is to consider drawing. If they prefer drawing or a combination of drawing, I'm going to get them in each prompt to think about the opening image. What are people going to see? Or what is sort of the defining image that like is going to tell this story. And they're going to draw that and put a sentence with it or a word with it. And that gives people who may not be writers an opportunity to partake in the writing prompt without having to like write the whole story out, you know? So that's important to adapt as well. And then I'm going to do a Q&A, and I'm going to encourage them to ask me any questions about the book, about story writing, about anything. And so that's my sample plan. Before I go to our Q&As, though, I'm going to show you one more thing. And that is my presentation for a picture book. So whenever I do a children's book, I ask the publisher for all the illustrations in image form, and I put them into a PowerPoint or Canva, however you do your presentations. And I wanted to show you it in this format because I'll put the title there. You'll see this little star with a things coming out of it. Those are your transitions. And I always use the page curl transition. So that doesn't work as well on that page. I'll show you on this page. So that it actually looks like you're turning the page on each of your book, on each book. So as you're reading it, it gives the impression that you're actually reading the story. So here's Because You Are. This is my book, Because You Are by Jael Richardson, illustrated by Danica Myers. Little one, there's something you should know. You are just right, just enough as you are. More than that, you are a marvel, a delight. You are the shape of a million dreams of greatness that form a powerful work of art. And so we're turning through the pages. I will say, so important, critical, basic thing for a picture book author, know how long it takes to read your story from start to finish. And you may have two versions of the way you read it. I've had people read it where they just read start to finish, and there's sometimes you want to read it and you want to ask questions. You want to say, what do you think's happening in this picture? Who are the people on the left? Oh, well, they look like that might be their grandma and grandpa. How do we know? Well, they have the halo, maybe they're ain't, right? So we're going to talk, you may talk about pages, and I wouldn't talk about all pages, but you may pick a few pages that you want to talk about. And so you want to have that timed version as well and understand how that works. So that's how I set up my PowerPoint presentations. And that is really everything that I wanted to share with you. And so if you have any questions, you can put them in the question and answer box to ask me. I feel like I'm hearing myself. And you can ask me anything about the presentation. I will, while you're preparing those questions, I'm actually just going to go through a few of the I'll give you some of the instructions for closing off today, and then I will come back to some questions that I kind of prepared. This is something I do as well. If you know that people may not have questions right off the top, or you don't know how it's going to go, you can sort of prepare questions in advance. You do live. Oh, this is a question that came through. Um, how do you do a live event that will be viewed on demand later? This is a really, really important question. We do it a lot at Fold, where sometimes you'll make a video, you'll do it live, but really the large majority of the audience is actually going to watch it on demand. And it's really, really important, if you want to do it well, to keep that in mind. Particularly, I find some people really expect a lot of interaction and really build a presentation that's based on immediate interaction. And that can sometimes work, but if you've ever watched something back that's based on immediate interaction and you're not there, there's also a downside to that. So it's really helpful to think about the majority or what you think the main group is going to be. And so the way I like to approach that is I like to build everything so I'm not dependent on interactivity. And then make opportunities when it comes up. Potentially, there might be windows where I specifically give room for interaction, or like put in the chat what your favorite name for the cat I drew is. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't, and it's a little bit of a trial and error. But highly recommend thinking about it as though someone's going to be watching it on YouTube afterwards. What can you share? What can you give? They're going to sort of be universal truths. Another thing people often ask me is about charging and how much to ask for. And so I'll just share, it, it depends. I don't recommend charging less than $200 in Canada for a school group presentation. There may be exceptions to that rule that you'll make. I have done some where they're doing my book for a class study. If I know that the school has purchased copies of the books, it might be 100, but 100 is pretty low these days. That's what I used to do when I started out the Stone Thrower in 2012. So I recommend about $200, but I also only recommend that if you're doing this kind of presentation where, and I should stop sharing, where you're doing a lesson plan, you're putting thought into it, you're taking into account curriculum, you're tying things in, you've thought about audience, you've crafted a really good time frame. And so 200 is sort of the minimum there when you've got that in mind and you've got a good plan and a good plan of execution. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to show you just a few. I don't want to call them announcements because then they seem like they're not important. These are actually really critical pieces of information. Um, we have our Pitch Perfect Kidlit edition on right now. If you're watching this, this is a good example of live versus on demand. You have until April 31st, 2026. The website is in the bottom right corner, thefoldcanada.org/, pitch perfect kids. You can submit a completed manuscript for a kidlit title, YA, picture book, nonfiction, fiction. And you will have the opportunity, if selected, to have that reviewed for feedback by an agent or editor. There are some costs associated with it. It's all there on that website. So make sure you take down that code. I hope I have my magic tech person on hand and I'm about to show some links. So hopefully those links will pop up in the chat. But in general, you can subscribe to the Fold newsletter and receive all the latest news on Fold directly in your inbox. If you don't get the link here, you can also just go to our website, thefoldcanada.org, and it's usually the first thing you can see at the bottom of the screen or somewhere on the screen to subscribe to the newsletter. Now we have a newsletter that you can customize so you can get more information about Fold Reads. You can get information about Fold Apparel, about the podcast. You can select what kind of content you want. We send our weekly newsletters for Fold and Fold Kids, but the other ones come out sporadically. So you can sign up for all those, including Fold Academy. We often also have an attendee survey. If you don't get that one here, we'll send it to you through the registration links. But we really appreciate your feedback. We're planning our next season of Fold Academy. We'll reveal that in September. We do free workshops all year round, apparently, because I'm doing one in July. And you can have the chance to log in and tune in then. And thank you so much for supporting. If you'd like to deepen your support, you can go to thefoldcanada.org and donate financially to support Fold Academy and the work we do here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here live. If you were here live, thank you for tuning in. If you were not able to join us live, we really enjoyed doing these events and conversations. I'll double check one last time for any questions. And here's the link for the job form. Yeah, so the survey's in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great one.